Hi, I'm Dr. Michael Polisi. I'm a urologist here at the Mount Sinai Beth Israel Hospital in beautiful New York City. I'd like to welcome to this edition of the National Kidney Foundation Facebook Live. I'm here with my friend and patient, Mr. Paul Burnett. We're going to be discussing a very important topic today, renal cell carcinoma, or what most people know as kidney cancer. While we hope to provide some awareness and understanding about this topic, we're also going to welcome any questions you may have in the comments section, and we'll also do our best to answer them at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I think we should talk a little bit about what kidneys are and what leads to kidney cancer. Most people understand the kidneys are sort of somewhere in your back area here. Kidneys are housed really behind your intestines or the retroperitoneal space. They're there to filter your blood, to help provide control with your blood pressure and also to improve your red blood cell count. When someone gets kidney cancer, you're developing a growth or something called renal cell cancer or renal adenocarcinoma. It's a tumor that develops on the kidney itself. And the important thing is that we want to catch this early. We don't want to find this at a later or advanced stage. And that's why testing for it is so vastly important. So talking about how do we diagnose kidney cancer and how do we treat it, I think we should bring in my friend and patient here, Mr. Paul Burnett, and we can talk a little bit about what led to his diagnosis and how we got to where we are here today.
Thank you, Doctor. Well, I had a kind of a strange, I was never tested for it, or I'd have regular yearly physicals, but it never showed up that I had any problems.
But your experiences were like a lot of people's experiences, that you're not being tested for it. This was discovered
Correct.
Because you went for another reason, right?
Correct. So I was away, and I happened to be going quail hunting, which I don't do often, but it was getting on and off the horse that I noticed a pain in my side. So when I got back to Long Island, home, I went to work, and I didn't feel so good. I still didn't feel good. So I decided to see my doctor, who's a gastroenterologist.
Gastroenterologist, yeah.
And because I thought there was some kind of blockage or stoppage. So I went to see him, and he gave me some medicine to take that night to see if I'd feel better. Next morning, I didn't, and I went to see him again, and he said, I think I'm going to send you for a test. So went for a CAT scan, and the next morning, this was Wednesday, he calls me up and said, look, Paul, I've got some bad news. It's not my problem. You have a very large tumor, and it looks cancerous. So I think you can go see a urologist. So,
and this was a tumor, obviously, on the kidney that was discovered. And the CAT scan that you had was really done for a GI issue or intestinal issue, right? That's what,
correct.
Right.
And at the time, I knew I had the tumor. I didn't know. I guess he knew that it was close to the kidney, but he didn't know if it was on the kidney or in the kidney. So he recommended I go to this urologist, which I did. And he was not very happy about what it looked like. The diagnosis, at least to him, he was very upset on the way it looked, and I got a very bad feeling at the time.
And obviously, you must have had a bad feeling at the time too.
Yes, I was with my wife, my son, and it didn't look good. And he suggested, I was out on Long Island, he suggested I go to the city. And he mentioned 2 hospitals in the city, and I had a friend of mine get me an appointment with both of those hospitals, and luckily one of them was yours, doctor, and I went to Mount Sinai to see Dr. Polisi. And I sent all the tests that I got an MRI after that also. I sent both tests to you, and we met with you on the next Monday. And you went over what the problem was. And one of the main problems that I had, besides being a large tumor, was I had horseshoe kidneys. And
so we should talk a little about that. So because a horseshoe kidney is actually an interesting finding and not something, it's relatively rare. It's actually a birth defect. And so what happens in development is normally most people develop a right and a left kidney. So if you take the 2 cups here, in the back area. But when the horseshoe kidney, what happens is that the two bottoms sort of stay attached, and then it really looks like a horseshoe, if you can visualize that. And so in your case, you had that, and on one of those sides, one of those units is where the tumor was. Not only was that causing problems for that one side, but it was starting to cause problems on the other side. And you know, it doesn't surprise me that you're already having some difficulties with it. Yeah, some pains.
So, you know, it's one thing to know that you have a tumor and it looks cancerous. It's another that you have a special kind of kidney that makes it harder to cure. So, needless to say, I wasn't that happy, and I think the doctor, you said that it was like horseshoe kidney is like 1 in a million. I've been telling my wife that I'm 1 in a million to begin with, so.
Now she knows. Now she
So
knows.
now it's just, it's done. It's fortified. So,
So when you, besides myself, you must have talked to somebody else as well, right?
I went to 3 doctors.
Okay.
I went 2 before you, and
We got to take those names down. Make sure.
we do. Well, I'm never going to see them again, but I'm sticking with Dr. Polisi. So, and then one afterwards. And once I got to tell you, once I met you, doctor, that the way you approached the diagnosis and the way you explained it to us, it seemed to me you had it under control. You've seen it before. You could do it. I'll never forget what you said to me. Like when I asked you what the diagnosis was, and you said, "Well, you're young, and you're in good health." Well, I thought I was up until this, but I didn't think so afterwards. So that made me feel good. And the way you explained it and explained what you were going to do and the outcome, I was very optimistic. And it really changed my whole outlook on it. And I felt much better after seeing you. I went to the doctor after you. I got depressed again, but I stuck with you. And so far it worked out.
So the important thing about that is that, you know, I think when we look at people who are diagnosed with kidney cancer, one of the things that we do need to look is to see what something called their performance status, which is how will they do with a surgery or with a treatment. And so saying that you are young and healthy is actually exactly what we're trying to say, is that it's like going through a marathon or getting ready for a race. You need to be in some kind of a shape to do that. You can't just go, you know, get up and run a full 24 miles or 26 miles, you know, without actually training for it. And the same goes for surgery. And so that's why it's an important thing to know what someone's performance status is and how well they're going to do. And you had a very high performance status, meaning that I felt that you were going to do extremely well with the surgery, and that afterwards, you know, the recovery time was going to be, you were going to be just fine.
Yeah, and you know, I had done things before, and I work out, you know, pretty regularly, and I take care of myself. And I played a lot of sports in my youth, so I thought I was in pretty good shape. But you know, the cancer thing is scary, and I know a lot of people that it hasn't worked out as well.
So did you do anything to prepare yourself for the surgery itself? You know, because we'd given you several options, right? Because
Yes.
that was also part of it.
Well, what I liked about what you did is I think I saw you on a Monday, and I believe the surgery was the next Wednesday. And I know how most people feel once I found out that I did have the tumor, and other doctors were saying, well, why don't you, you know, we'll think about it a month from now, or I can fit you in a month, or I wanted to get it over with and get it done right away. Once we found out what it was, you explained it, I wanted to do it right away. We had the operation that following Wednesday.
Right.
I was in, I think, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I went home Saturday morning.
Right.
And the other thing I have to bring out, that you said you were going to do it, if you could, laparoscopically and robotically. And none of the other doctors would do that. I mean, I mentioned it to them. They thought that would be, based on the size of the tumor, that they couldn't do it. So that made me really be optimistic about this, and I wanted that.
So part of this is, you know, obviously one of the things is we want to get the tumor out through small incisions without compromising cancer control, without compromising safety, and we want to get you through the surgery in one piece, and obviously we want to make sure we get all the cancer out. the techniques nowadays are such that we can do these very complex procedures through small incisions, through a robotic or laparoscopic approach. And in your case, no question that was a feasibility. And you had the added thing, which was that we had to actually detach your 2 kidneys and turn them from 1 into 2. But that's not something that necessarily changes the overall outcome. And the important thing is to get the cancer out in one piece, and what's called en bloc, or removing all the sort of surrounding tissue and lymph nodes. In your case, we were able to do that very easily and quite efficiently, which was nice.
Yeah, and I thought, based on the size and the fact the horseshoe kidney idea came up, it's something I really didn't need at the time.
Right.
And with the other doctors saying it was a real problem. But, as it turned out, I was out of the hospital that Saturday morning. I was walking around the block in 2 days. I probably was out of work for 2 weeks, and went back and pretty much was my old self. I was surprised on how well I recovered.
Right.
And
So and that's one of the other things. Work is always important. We want to get people back into their normal lives and back into their routine. And I know for you that was a big deal as well, to get you back at work as soon as possible.
Well, I have an unusual circumstance because, I don't think having cancer is good at any time, but for me it was really a bad time. I was in the process of a company looking to buy my business. I've been in business for 35 years, and something I really didn't think about, but they came to me and they were seriously looking into this. So there was a lot at stake in keeping me healthy and being around and talking to these people and negotiating. So I couldn't be out for months. So you coming along and with the diagnosis and with the robotic, and my recovery was great. And the reason I was also worried about it, my wife had, the year before, had hip surgery. And while the surgery went well, the recovery time took months, and it was hard for her. And I saw that, and I was really worried about the recovery.
Right. Well, I think that's also something that a lot of patients, when they come to see us and see their surgeon, they're obviously worried about getting back to work right away, getting back to their normal routines. And so this sort of modern way or modern technique of using minimally invasive surgery is really sort of revolutionized that ability to get people back. And in my own personal opinion, the faster you're back at work, the faster you are. For instance, if you do need other therapies, for instance, like chemotherapy or immunotherapy or some of these other things that for advanced stage cancers, we can get you those levels much quicker. We can get you to that stage much quicker to be able to start those treatments. And so, my own personal opinion, I think that has something to do with it. And yours, and we've talked about this before. Your tumor was relatively large, and so there was still a question of whether or not we were going to have to do that.
Yes.
As whether we were going to have to treat you with something else after the surgery itself, and something called adjuvant therapy or adjuvant chemotherapy or adjuvant immunotherapy. And so that also throws a whole other wrench into the situation too.
Which I was not looking forward to. So, as a matter of fact, the first thing I remember waking up the next morning and my wife being there, I go, she goes, doctor said it was very successful. I said, did he do it robotically? I wanted to get out of there and get back to work, get back to being myself as fast as I could. And she said he did. So that made me very happy. And
excellent. All right. So we saw each other, I guess, 2 weeks after the surgery, sort of your post-operative visit. Usually I talk to my patients about what the diagnosis is, what the pathology is, and which I think is an important part of the process, because that's what sets up the next sort of stages of what we do after the operation. Okay, there's the operation, we got to get you through that, and then there's the recovery period as well, and something known as the surveillance period, where we want to make sure that when we're monitoring you, we want to watch you to make sure you don't have a recurrence, and that if you do have a recurrence, we want to catch you early. And so you're 2 years out now, which is great, it's fantastic, yes. And clearly you're doing fantastic, and that's what we want to see.
Well, as a matter of fact, my golf game's improved. I don't know if it's because of the surgery or
Well, yeah, now you're retired, so
That
there's certain things you can't really,
That could be.
you have a little more time.
But the other thing that, as far as the maintenance, I guess the main thing that you told me was, it's good to exercise, so I've been exercising even more than I used to. I've cut out the red meats. I'm eating a lot more vegetables and fruit and
I mean, these are all important things.
salads.
Moderation's always the key. Exercise the key. Seeing your regular doctor at least once a year. Watching your blood pressure. Watching your weight. I mean, these are all the things that are just important no matter what kind of surgery that you do. But particularly in kidney surgery, you're in your case, you're missing one kidney. That kidney
Yes.
that's still there and doing well is going to grow over time. It's something called compensatory hypertrophy, going to get larger. Most people, it takes over well enough to be like what you were before with two kidneys. In your case, one big kidney, I guess.
Yeah.
But in the sense that it's important to make sure we preserve that function as much as possible.
Well, as a matter of fact, I guess the last time we met, I believe a couple of months ago, you did, after I go now for every six months to see how I'm progressing. And as my son says, the beauty of it is when they take the test, the key is that it's unremarkable. So I've been unremarkable for the last 2 years, and I'm pretty happy about that. My wife thought I was always unremarkable to begin with, but now that also been confirmed. But
like everything else, you want sometimes things boring is good, right? Sometimes
yeah, but see, I didn't know that. At first I was unremarkable. I didn't like it. But yes, so now we're down to. I used to, when we started out, I'd see you every quarter.
Right.
And
so we base sort of our surveillance, or when we see each other, on what the pathology is, what the size of the tumor is, what the stage is. Yours was a little bit further along, so we saw you a little bit more often. So every 3 months in the beginning, and then we went to every 6 months, and eventually we'll go to once a year, and that once a year will be lifelong, and that's where we want to get to, obviously.
And which is fine. Like you said one time, you'll have to come once a year, and I know it's an annoyance, but hopefully it is just an annoyance.
It's an annoyance because you live in Charleston now. Yeah.
Yeah. Not that I don't want to see you, but I like seeing you every quarter, but I'd rather see you for dinner or on the golf course, maybe skiing.
Regular reasons, that's right.
So I did start out every quarter, and I had the CAT scan and the MRI. I'm not a big fan of the MRI, but I got through it.
And is there anything that you did, because that's actually one thing that a lot of patients have problems with, it, which is the claustrophobic from the MRI, or it's a confined space, it's very loud, and so honestly, that's one of the biggest hesitations to doing that test. And even though it's a great test in the sense that there's no radiation involved, it gives us great and very accurate information. I really have a lot of trouble getting patients to do that. So what is your trick? What do you do?
It's funny you should say that because. When I first was diagnosed, I went for the MRI, and then afterwards we did an MRI. And you're running around, you have cancer, so you do it. And I didn't like it, but I did it. Then once I had like 6 months to think about it, I was, a month before I was getting
anxious,
and
sure.
I could see it. I didn't know I was that way. I didn't think I was. I mean, I pretty much do anything. I go on every rides, but somehow that got to me. And I did. I found a stand-up MRI.
Stand-up MRI, okay.
Which is and it's open.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. I find that.
So they've become very popular over the years. They're good for just a surveillance or a screening type of procedure. Where we have some trouble sometimes if we need some really accurate information or some very sensitive information, sometimes they're not sensitive enough. But they're fine for purposes of just making sure we're not missing anything or any recurrences or tumors. But it's something that we'll definitely keep that in mind next time.
And the other thing I think we should mention is you did find a nodule on my lung.
Right.
And which I wasn't happy about. But for the 2 years we've been watching it, and it seems to be okay. but you did recently send me to somebody that was a specialist in the lung area.
Correct.
And though you told me not to worry, I was worried.
Sure.
You kept telling me not to worry. The more you told me, the more I worried I got. We did go to see him.
That's a little trick. I don't know if you know that.
So I did go to see him, and he said it was so unremarkable. He can't believe I went to see him. So it turned out so well. So as long as I keep getting this unremarkable, I'll go for the test.
Fantastic. So, you know, we're sort of at a point where we're running out of time, unfortunately. You know, even though this is great, and I appreciate you being here, Paul. I'd like to take a few minutes to, you know, talk about some of the questions that may have come in, and if there are any questions and you think of something, please put them in the comments section, and obviously we'll do our best to answer those questions. We have our first question actually is, and this is a question I get a lot from many of my patients, which is, you know, I have kidney cancer. Should I have my kids and my wife and husband tested? So question is, you know, you have kidney cancer. You know, Paul, you were diagnosed, and so what did you do about that? Do you tell your family? Do you keep it to yourself? What's the best thing to do?
Well, what I did, I'm one of 7 children. So I told my brothers and sisters what I had, and every one of them went and got tested to see if they had it. Luckily, they didn't. So I think it was good that they went, and now they're going to be watching it, so I think that's good. My father did die of cancer. It was colon cancer. So it's something we should be watching, and this got everybody's attention.
Right, right.
And
that's also one of the things about kidney cancer is that a large component of kidney cancer is genetic. It runs in the families. It's passed on from generation to generation. You know, we're at an age now where we do many more imaging studies than we ever did, and so we're detecting kidney cancers when they're smaller, when they're, you know, when they're in more of an infancy stage. And so I think, you know, 30, 40, 50 years ago, we weren't catching these because people just weren't getting imaging studies. So it's quite likely someone in the family had some type of a tumor, whether it was a grandfather, great-grandfather, great-grandmother. And, you know, I truly believe that it's important to get the family screened. These tests are relatively cheap. An ultrasound, you know, it's not like it used to be from 20 years ago. An ultrasound is a $50, $60 test in certain instances. And clearly you did that as well, Paul. You got your family tested.
I think it's important, especially with me and what you told me, that I have been going for regular physicals, but it wasn't detected. And the fact that the tumor could have been growing for 10 years, we got it earlier,
right.
I might still have my right kidney.
This is true. This is true. And this is where like foundations like the National Kidney Foundation helps us, you know, bring the word out that people should get themselves tested and get screened regularly as well. So what do we talk about some of the other things? If you have another question that came in, if you have a kidney transplant, are your odds any different from getting kidney cancer? That's actually a great question. Wow. So, you know, I have a lot of kidney transplant patients in my practice. You would think that someone who's got a kidney transplant and is immunosuppressed, it has to be an immunosuppression, has a higher likelihood of getting cancer in general, and for that matter, kidney cancer. But that's actually not the case. We see that it's almost the same as in the regular population, maybe slightly elevated. But obviously it's a devastating diagnosis to get a cancer in your kidney transplant. So these are people who have already developed renal failure and now have a kidney transplant that's been donated by somebody else. And to have that develop in those types of kidneys is obviously not a great situation. No. So we want to catch that as early as possible. Okay. Question number 3 here. What do you think of chemo treatment? Okay, so we know that renal cell cancer is not exactly, does not really respond to chemotherapy. There's basically, up until recently, there was only something called immunotherapy, which was basically a way to rev up your own immune system to fight off the cancer. Renal cell cancer is a very interesting cancer. It's one of those that's highly responsive to the immune system. So if your immune system is down, it may react worse as opposed to when your immune system is up and able to fight off the cancer. So immunotherapy has sort of always been the traditional therapy, something called cytokines, IL-2, interferon, which were therapies that worked to a certain degree, but they had terrible, terrible side effects. Some of our newer treatments, so there's what are called targeted therapies and the newer immunotherapies that are now available, Targeted therapies actually look at sort of certain pathways in the cancer pathway. These came out in early 2000, 2005. There's a whole slew of them out on the market right now. They're being used in renal cell cancer, quite successful to a certain degree. They don't necessarily cure anything, but they do slow down the cancer, which is important. The next generation of immunotherapy, that's sort of the next holy grail, we hope. We're starting to see it being used in not just renal cell cancer, but in other cancers as well. And so that's where we're starting to see some really interesting results, and hopefully get some really much better results, especially for the advanced or late stage metastatic type of cancers that we see.
Good.
So how about the next question here? Can kidney cancer affect kidney function? So I think that's actually also an important question.
That is a good question.
It is a good question because part of your kidneys actually has cancer in it, and so is that part of the kidney working anymore? The likelihood is no. Okay, what's happened is that the normal system that's working there is not going to be functioning properly. And especially if you undergo surgery, so either removal of the kidney completely, or we do what's called a partial nephrectomy, where we're preserving the kidney function but leaving a good portion of the kidney behind. We're going to naturally have to remove a part of that kidney, and so depending what percent we leave behind, 80%, 50%, that will affect what your kidney function is going to be. The important thing is to keep as much kidney function as possible within the realm of also avoiding that the cancer comes back. Kidney dysfunction or renal failure can be very devastating as well, and also can be a problem for long-term mortality. People are on dialysis. It's always better to get a kidney transplant, but obviously someone who's been treated for kidney cancer, that obviously throws a whole wrench into the whole organization. Next question. What can I do to prevent or improve my chances with this cancer in the future? So I think this goes back again to our surveillance and the importance of actually monitoring imaging and going to your doctor regularly. And like you said, Paul, you went for a different reason, which honestly, that's how I see most of my patients nowadays. We don't really see patients primarily because they're going to check their kidneys, they're going to check something else.
And that does bother me to an extent, since I was going regularly, a physical every year, and it didn't come up. I think it's important for the people to, how you should concentrate on getting the test for your kidneys.
Right.
Because I don't think it's being done regularly.
No.
Or as a matter of course. So mine almost could have been prevented, I guess, 10 years ago if I would have found it. So I think we got to get it out there, and I guess that's what we're doing.
I guess so. I hope so. All right, guys. Well, unfortunately, that's the end of the show that we have and end of the time. But on behalf of the National Kidney Foundation, I definitely want to thank our sponsors, Eisai, Exelixis, and Novartis for their support in making this program possible. Especially want to thank Paul Barnett and his family for letting him go for the afternoon so that he spent some time with us talking about his experience.
And I want to thank you for the good job that you've been doing and you did for me. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it, Paul. All the best. And hopefully we'll do this again sometime, I hope.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions and you want to check back on the National Kidney Foundation's Facebook page in the coming days, we're going to post answers to other questions that were sent in. You can also contact the National Kidney Foundation by calling toll-free at 855-NKF-CARES. Also email at nkfcares@kidney.org. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, I'd like to wish you all good health and good luck. And to you, Paul.
Thank you.
Have a good day.